There are two types of Canadian investors: those who understand the U.S. tax treaty, and those who are voluntarily burning 15% of their income. If you are holding U.S. stocks in your TFSA, you are in the second group. You are paying a penalty for ignorance. Every time a dividend hits your account, the U.S. government takes a 15% cut, and the CRA refuses to give you a credit for it. It is money that simply vanishes into thin air. This is the single most common mistake I see in Canadian portfolios. It bleeds your returns, it kills your compounding, and it is completely preventable. We are going to perform a forensic audit on your holdings, and we are going to get that 15% back. On this channel, we take an audit-first approach to wealth. We don't care about the returns you get, we care about the returns you keep. To fix this mess, we need to restructure your holdings using the asset location grid. This isn't just about picking stocks. It is about placing them in the specific legal jurisdiction where they are treated best. We are going to cover 4 things. 1. The withholding trap. Why the TFSA is actually considered a foreign trust by the US government and how that triggers the penalty. 2. The interest ladder. Why your GICs and bonds are ticking time bombs in a non-registered account when you factor in inflation. 3. The international blind spot. Most people fix their US stocks, but forget about Europe and Asia. We will expose the level 2 tax leak that almost everyone misses. And 4. The perfect map. Exactly which ETF goes into which acronym to reduce your tax drag to 0. Let's start with the immediate bleeding. The US withholding tax. Most Canadians treat the TFSA and the RRSP as interchangeable buckets. You think they both grow tax-free, so it doesn't matter. Mathematically, that is false. To understand why, you have to understand the history of the Canada-US tax treaty. This treaty was signed to prevent double taxation on retirement income. The United States agreed to respect the RRSP because it is a formal pension vehicle. They said, okay, if a Canadian holds US stocks in an RRSP, we will treat it like a US IRA. We won't tax it. This is why, if you hold a US stock in an RRSP, you get 100% of the dividend. But here is the catch. The TFSA is a relatively new invention. It didn't exist when the core framework of these treaties was built. To the IRS, your tax-free savings account is not a retirement plan. It is just a random foreign bank account. They do not care about it. They certainly do not respect it. So the protection of the treaty vanishes. When Apple, Microsoft, or a US ETF pays a dividend, the IRS legally views you as a foreign investor. They automatically skim 15% off the top before that money even leaves the United States. Now, you might be thinking, it's only 15% on a 2% dividend. Who cares? You should, because you cannot claim this tax back. If you held that stock in a non-registered account, the CRA would give you a foreign tax credit. Basically, the CRA says, we see you paid 15% to the US, so we will reduce your Canadian tax bill by that amount. It washes out, but because the TFSA is tax-free, you file no tax return for it. The CRA says, you didn't pay us any tax on this money, so we certainly aren't giving you a credit for tax you paid to someone else. The money is just gone, vaporized. Let's run the forensic math on this, because the opportunity cost is higher than you think. Imagine you have a $50,000 position in a US dividend growth ETF yielding 4%. That's $2,000 in gross income per year. Scenario A, the RRSP. The treaty protects you. You receive the full $2,000. You reinvest it. Scenario B, the TFSA. The invisible border guard steps in. The IRS takes $300. You only receive $1,700. You might say, $300 is nothing, but you are forgetting the rule of 72. You are forgetting compounding. That $300 annual leak, assuming the market grows at 7%, compounds into a loss of roughly $19,000 over a 25-year horizon. And that is just for one position. If you have a diversified portfolio of US dividend aristocrats, You could be bleeding enough capital to buy a luxury car simply because you clicked buy in the wrong account. I want you to pause the video right now and log into your brokerage app. Open your TFSA. Scroll through your holdings. Do you see the US flag next to any of your dividend payers? Do you see symbols like VOO, SPY, or O? If you do, you have an active leak. You are currently funding the US government instead of your own retirement. If this explanation just saved you that $19,000 leak, do me a favor and hit the like button. It tells the YouTube algorithm that Canadian finance content should be about math, not hype. Now let's move to the second quadrant of our grid. Fixed income, bonds, GICs, high interest savings ETFs. This is where the safety mindset destroys your wealth through a mechanism I call the inflation pincer. Many prudent investors put their safe money in a non-registered account because they want to save their TFSA room for high-growth stocks like Tesla or Nvidia. They think, I don't want to waste my tax-free room on a boring 5% GIC. I want my biggest winners to be tax-free. This is intuitively correct, but mathematically dangerous. You have to look at how different types of income are taxed. Capital gains are tax-advantaged. Canadian dividends are tax-advantaged. But interest income? Interest from a GIC or a bond? That is the most punished form of income in the Canadian tax code. It is taxed at your full marginal rate, 100% inclusion. Let's look at the real rate of return. Hypothetically, let's say you buy a GIC paying 5%. You feel good, but you are in a 40% tax bracket. The government takes 40% of that interest immediately. Your 5% return is now cut down to a 3% net return. Now, factor in inflation. If inflation is running at 3%, your real return is 0. You didn't make money. You just spun your wheels. You maintained your purchasing power, but you built no wealth. Compare that to a capital gain. If you make a 5% profit selling a stock, only half is taxable. At a 40% bracket, you only lose 20% to tax. Your net return is 4%. Minus 3% inflation, you still have a 1% real positive return. By keeping your safe, interest-bearing investments in a taxable account, you are exposing them to the harshest tax treatment possible, which often pushes your real return into negative territory. The audit first rule. Interest-bearing assets belong in your RRSP or TFSA first. They need the shelter more than your growth stocks do. So, we have established that US dividends belong in your RRSP to avoid the 15% leak. But now you have a logistical problem. If you are using the standard free version of WealthSimple or many basic trading apps, you have a flaw in your account structure. These accounts force you to convert your Canadian dollars to US dollars the moment you buy a stock, charging you a 1.5% fee. Then, when you sell that stock, they force you to convert it back to Canadian dollars, charging you another 1.5%. You are saving 15% in tax only to lose 3% in fees. That is not a win. That is just changing who robs you, from the IRS to the bank. This is why I specifically use the WealthSimple USD account upgrade for this strategy. By activating the USD account, you stop the forced conversion loop. You convert your cash once, hold it in USD, and trade as many times as you want without paying that conversion fee ever again. Do the math. If you are trading more than $700 worth of US stocks a month, the subscription pays for itself in saved fees. I've linked the details on how to activate this feature below. It is the only way to make the math work on this platform. Before we build the final map, we need to address the forbidden box: international stocks. I am talking about stocks from Europe, Asia, and emerging markets. The EAFE index. Many of you hold ETFs like XEF or VIU in your TFSA. You might assume that because these aren't US stocks, the US tax treaty issues don't apply. And you are right, they don't. But that doesn't mean you are safe. When you buy a German stock, the German government levies a withholding tax. When you buy a Japanese stock, Japan levies a tax. If you hold these in a TFSA, you are subject to the same problem as the US stocks. The tax is taken at the source, and you cannot recover it. But here is where it gets worse. If you hold these international stocks in an RRSP, you are also not safe. The US-Canada Treaty only covers the US and Canada. It does not force Germany or Japan to respect your RRSP. So, for international dividends, there is often no place to hide from the withholding tax, except for a non-registered account, where you can claim the foreign tax credit. Let's finalize the map. Here is your cheat sheet for 2026. Box 1. The RRSP. Primary asset. US-listed dividend stocks and high-yield corporate bonds. Why? The tax treaty prevents the 15% withholding tax. Box 2. The TFSA. Primary asset. Canadian growth stocks and Canadian ETFs. Secondary asset. US growth stocks, but only if they don't pay a dividend. Remember, 15% of 0 is 0. Box 3. The non-registered. Primary asset. Canadian dividend stocks like banks and pipelines. Why? You get the dividend tax credit, which allows you to earn up to $50,000 a year tax-free in some provinces. Box 4. The FHSA. Strategy. Timeline arbitrage. If buying in less than 5 years, cash and GICs. If buying in more than 10 years, treat it like a super TFSA. You now have the map. You know exactly where to place every asset to legally bypass the IRS and maximize your real rate of return. But a tax-optimized portfolio is useless if you trigger the CRA's #1 penalty trap. Most investors focus so hard on what they are buying that they lose track of their contribution room. And if you over-contribute to your TFSA by even $1, the CRA charges you a penalty of 1% per month. That is a guaranteed 12% annual loss. It wipes out your returns instantly. You need to audit your contribution room before you execute this map. I have broken down exactly how to calculate your limit and how to fix an overcontribution if you've already made one in this video right here. Click that, check your limit, and I'll see you in the next one. I know the general rules, but I don't know your specific numbers. Treat this video as a map, not a prescription. Do your own due diligence, and see you in the next one.